Thank you, Professor Zhao. I know you all know him as Sam, but he's always Seisheng to me. And we've known each other many, many years, but we've never had a chance to really work together. And it's a real privilege for me to visit his institute and the university here. I think it's the first time I've spoken at the University of Denver, Colorado at Denver. And I've spoken in Boulder a couple of times, but I'm delighted to be here. And I know I'm welcome because we're getting fresh snow on the mountains, and I intend to enjoy that tomorrow. So thank you very much for having me out. A subtitle is really the first point of my talk that we slightly changed. And really, I think maybe I shouldn't give you the punchline, but I already gave Sam my punchline. But I'm going to argue through this talk that the events in the Middle East are important to China, and they're very critical to China's current and future development. However, I don't see a Jasmine revolution in China. I'm calling for a Jasmine tea revolution. Of course, Moli Hua Cha, Chinese jasmine tea, is very popular in China, and it's going to take a popular uprising, as we've seen in the Middle East, to shake China in any significant way. However, I don't think we can entirely rule it out. That's why I'm saying it's a jasmine tea possibility. Maybe it should be brick tea, zhuang cha, because they throw bricks, these kids. Okay, so I think the first place to start is China and Middle Eastern relations. I want to give a little bit of a historical background there. Most people don't talk about both of them, but since I started working on Muslims in China, I realized that China indeed is very close to the Middle East, and events in the Middle East do reverberate in China. And particularly, energy and religion rarely get put in the same sentence. I know economists have focused on energy, anthropologists and other scholars have looked at religion. I think I'm the only person that's putting the two issues together. And I have been doing that for about 30 years. Because I traveled to Al-Azhar, the Madrasa mosque complex in Cairo in 1983. And I met with Hui Muslim students, pilgrims. And that's when I first began to think, wow, there are some tight connections here. And a few of those students began eventually to work in China's foreign service. And one of them rose to the rank of first secretary of the Saudi Arabian Embassy. Needless to say, we still keep in touch. And a lot of my information comes through some of these very, very good friends and sources. But really one of the big issues that I've been focusing on for the last 10 to 15 years is this area of China known as Xinjiang, this northwest corner of China, which really straddles China and Central Asia and the Middle East, and is the crossroads for a lot of the issues that we're going to be looking at. So we have to talk, and we have to look at a little bit at this Xinjiang problem for China. Some transnational issues and some conclusions. And of course, China is catching a whiff of the Jasmine revolution in the Middle East. We've seen a security tightening. Journalists have been prevented from reporting in public spaces in China, particularly in Shanghai, in People's Square there, as well as in Tiananmen and Beijing. And China is seriously concerned, and I think we should take that to heart. Chinese leadership respond very quickly to these events, and they are focusing in on. One of the issues that continues to bedevil China is the so-called Xinjiang problem. I think in Colorado especially, if I were to say the Tibet problem, everyone would know exactly what I'm talking about. And I know there's a lot of interest in Tibet, quite a bit of sympathy, I think, particularly in Boulder. I'm not so sure about Denver. But I'm sure that's an issue that everyone here is well up to speed on. Xinjiang, however, is a little bit like wine, I think, in English. It's hard to pronounce. So we don't drink, Sauvignon Blanc, we drink Chardonnay, because we can pronounce it. Thanks to Sideways, we started drinking Pinot Noir, but before that, we drank Merlot, because we could pronounce that. And Xinjiang's hard to pronounce, it's hard to find on the map. Uyghurs, the group of people, the largest minority group there, are also hard to pronounce, hard to figure out. But for China, this has been a major area of concern for many years. It's China's largest province. It has a history of independence and rebellions. And also last July 2009, the bloodiest riots in PRC history took place. 172 people officially were killed that we know about, government statistics. 1,792 people were injured. I don't know how they get all of these numbers, but we do know that this shook China, these events. Nobody had seen this kind of ethnic conflagration. Of course, in the United States, it's not like they happen every week, but we are used to it. I grew up in LA, and I was there during Rodney King and Watts riots, I vaguely remember. I am that old. We're sort of used to that. China's not used to ethnic riots, where you see people on your television set going after each other with knives and sticks. Prior to these events, and to try to summarize, I participated in a research project. We called it the Xinjiang Project. And when we tried to summarize it, and it's an edited volume, I recommend it. I still think it's one of the best summaries. It goes over the entire history of the region, the economics, the politics, religion, anthropology. I wrote 2 chapters. Some of you may know that all 18 scholars associated with this book and a conference that hosted it, all funded by Luce Foundation and public funds, have been banned from going to China. They're on a blacklist. Now, no other scholarly group, a few individuals like Andrew Nathan or Perry Link, who somewhat, understandably have gotten their visas canceled to go to China. But there's no other group, even those working on Tibet, Taiwan, human rights, women's rights, Falun Gong, all of these hot button issues, Taiwan Straits, Taiwan problems, have ever been banned from China. Now, some people have problems, some journalists have problems to go back, but most of them eventually go back and forth. All 18 of us in this project have been blacklisted. Now, I've managed through a few friends and long-term connections to go back 3 times since 2003. I was going in 2003 to Xinjiang alone 10 times a year, just to Xinjiang, for about 5 years. So you can see how that's changed my research agenda. Thank heavens, thank Allah. There's also the Middle East and Central Asia and Southeast Asia to go to. So China, I haven't spent as much time recently as I would like to. We'll see. They say it's getting better. One of the scholars who's trying repeatedly to get to China just went in December. I'm the only one of the 18 that's been back 3 times. I think it's partly, why Xinjiang? Why is it such a problem for China, as opposed to, say, Tibet and things like that? And that's what this talks to me about, the strategic importance of this region for China. Tibet is important to China, but I don't think it has the strategic salience for China that Xinjiang does, and the Middle East, its Middle East relations. Ben Anderson said that it was stretching the short skin of the nation over the gigantic body of the empire. That the PRC accomplished, starting with the Nationalist Revolution in 1912, and then the Communist establishment of the People's Republic of China in 1949. China did it. They established on the borders of the old empire, except for Mongolia, this huge country, and they deserve a lot of credit for what they've accomplished, creating a multinational nation state that is shoulder to shoulder with the rest of the world today. And I think they should be given credit for holding this amazing country together with all of the challenges and all of the issues. Now, one of the strategies that China did that was to create the idea and invoke the idea of a Minzu, a nation. This idea did not exist in Chinese. It was imported. Like science, the word for science, like the word for religion, for democracy, 科学, 民主, 宗教, all are imports to China. And so was Minzu, the idea of a nation. And by importing that idea, they got a Han majority and a small minority. They used the Soviet model. They cut the pie a little bit differently. They built upon the nationalists who for benefit of studying overseas, Sun Yat-sen and others, Kang Youwei, imported this idea of a Minzu, a nationality, a nation, and they developed 55 minorities and 1 Han majority. So they expanded the nationalist 5 peoples, the Wuzu Gonghe idea, and they expanded it into 56. Now, 400 groups applied. They wanted to be groups. That's how diverse China is. But the government said, well, we don't want to recognize too many. This is enough problem. And actually, the early communists were handing out promises to enlist support. They used the Soviet model, and Soviet advisors on the Long March gave them some of these ideas. It's an excellent book by my Tongban Tongchui classmate, Dean Yang Shengming, at the Minzu Dashui, Minzu University in Beijing, the largest nationalities college in China. He's written this book, An Ethnography of China. in which he talks about there's still 1 million unidentified peoples in China, including groups that we may have known about, Sherpa, Khmer, and others. Interesting, he's the first scholar, an ethnologist, for whom I have tremendous respect, who in this book calls these unidentified peoples Minzu. So they're sort of like proto-nations, if you know that Hobsbawm rhetoric. What does a proto-nation want to become? A real nation. And the question for the Tibetans and the Uyghurs is, as a nationality, would they be content to just be a minority nationality? Or does this system encourage them to move from being a minority nationality to a bona fide nationality with their own country, as happened in the former Soviet Union, as we know, just across the border. Now, how does China accomplish this incorporation of minorities into its program? It's an affirmative action empire, as Terry Martin argued for the former Soviet Union, puts pictures of minorities on their coinage, a lot of privileges, special treatments. Most of them we scholars who study this issue recognize as rather token. They're sort of nods of the hat to minorities. They haven't really made a huge difference in terms of their mortality, their health, their educational opportunities. But they're there, and interestingly enough, because they're there, partly because of that, we have this huge explosion of minority population growth in China. Now, if you were to believe what is often published in the Western press, that minorities in China are oppressed, persecuted, discriminated against, etc., why would these numbers be going up? Why would China be giving all these privileges? I think the story on the ground is much more complicated than that. There are incidents of oppression and discrimination, certainly. But the reality today is that in China, it's quite popular to be ethnic. There are ethnic restaurants, Tibetan restaurants. Tibetan medicine is booming in China. Tibetan Buddhism is popular. Uyghur restaurants, you can sing and dance. Mosques are overflowing. Temples are overflowing. Minority ceremonies, culture is exploding. A lot of it to do with globalization and tourism, domestic and foreign. So something's going on, and China continues to celebrate its minorities. And we just saw this last October at its tremendous National Day celebrations, not only showing its power, but showing its diversity. Still, its People's Congress is famous for having representatives in their national garb, costumes, instead of their Western garb, their Western clothing. And if you remember the Olympic opening ceremonies, which was just a remarkable event, you remember that there were these minorities who were marching at the forefront. And that was China's signaling to the rest of the world that China has come of age, but the minorities are still there, they're still in the forefront with Chairman Mao, and they're moving forward. China's moving forward, and these people are in lockstep. This kind of sort of military marching forward was unsettling for a lot of non-Chinese watching these events. And then also raise the question, who are these people? Who are all these minorities in China? Well, today we're going to talk about Muslims. I mentioned already there's about 9% of China's total population. We're talking about nearly 130 million people are minorities. Within that, about 21 million are Muslims. I'm going to focus on the Muslims today. I don't work on Tibet. It's not my specialty. I've been there about 5 or 6 times. So I can take some questions on that, but it's not my specialty. I'm going to focus on the Muslims. And the reason we'll talk about these two groups is they're not only very important to China in terms of history, excuse me, working on a bit of a cold here, but also that there are large numbers and they're strategically located in important places. There are some smaller groups that we won't have time to talk about, but they're very interesting in and of themselves, including the Tajiks, who are the only Shiite, Ismaili Shiite, not 12 or Iranian-style Shiites, in China.